Right, well, hello everybody. We're going to get started on our session. Welcome to our chapter, a critical analysis of multi-logical synergies. Now, that sounds extremely complicated. I promise you it's not really that complicated. What it really is trying to capture in all of this is the autobiographical experience of the three authors. So let me explain that. So there's me. I was a supervisor of two students, one student being based at Pearson College and the other at the University of West London. Ashton was doing her research project, but she had done an internship prior to this. Frasier, who is here with me today, he was a degree apprentice. So what were the synergies, and I was the connection between the two of them because I was their supervisor, what were the synergies that we could bring together in a chapter that we can then reflect on and can draw some lessons out of this. And this is really what the chapter is trying to capture, a critical analysis of these layered kind of lines that are running across each other and the synergies that we can pick up from that. So what are some of the synergies, or what are some of the lines that are running across it? Firstly, there's the fact that these were Gen Y students researching Gen Z students. So the whole book is about Gen Y and Z. Here we have practitioners, if you would like, who are actually doing research, but are telling us about the research they're doing among Gen Zs. And then there's me, a Gen X supervisor. And what am I learning about this new and emerging labor force, the Gen Ys and the Gen Zs? We also have two different kinds of work integrated learning programs that we're reflecting on. We have an internship, which is a small, intense time, and a degree apprenticeship, which is stretched right across the time of the degree. What I think the students were not aware of, if we can move to the next slide, is, and this comes from Kolb's book on reflection, is that the three traditional components of experiential learning were Levin, Dewey, and Piaget. Now, Levin is the one where we always use the leadership theories, autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire. That's Levin's theories. But Levin was one of the founding fathers of experiential learning. Now, Frasier was probably not aware that this was actually part of experiential learning, but I find it fascinating as a work integrated learning expert that this is exactly the kind of leadership thing he did choose to actually work on as a degree apprentice. The same with Ashton. Ashton had done an internship. She was moved during that internship around fast fashion and the ethics involved in that. And so she chose to do her final year project on that as well. But what she's engaging in here is Piaget's moral curriculum, ethics. And then, of course, there's me, Dewey, and drawing on work-based learning, work-integrated learning, how we take what we're learning, connect the theory to that, and then continue to develop in our trajectories in terms of our careers. So what we did in terms of this chapter is we used what's called bricolage in writing the chapter. We used bricolage methodology. Bricolage is where you are repurposing something which was purposed for something else. So leftover wood of a chair, we then repurpose it into a sculpture. It wasn't designed for that, but who cares? It's now free and can be used for a different purpose. We want to use the methodologies not to get the same old results. We wanted to find some results that are in the shadows, that are lurking beyond the normal process that we are taking. And so hence the chapter in some ways feels messy or looks messy, but it's bricolage at work. And as incorporated in the bricolage, of course, there was the research that Frasier was doing and that Ashton was doing using interviews and surveys. And all of this, again, this is the bricolage element, is for all of us to now reflect back on this in our various contexts and say, what did we learn? What did we gain from this? And the chapter is trying to capture all of that. So let me hand over to Frasier, and he will talk to us about his focus on leadership among Gen Zs. Over to you, Frasier.
Thank you, Trevor. I'm thrilled to be a co-author and contributor to this chapter. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's tuning in today and attending this exciting book conference. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to take you through my piece of research and give you a snippet of one of the key findings from our research. As I was the first apprentice within my company, I have a great passion for work integrated learning, and I'm very thankful for the opportunities it's given me. As I was starting a chartered manager's degree apprenticeship, I wanted to relate my research back to management and also try to give something back to my company for providing me with this opportunity. Therefore, with Generation Z entering the global workforce at a rapid rate, I wanted to orientate my main research question around leadership in Generation Z. Hence, why my main research question was to investigate whether senior managers within Company A are adapting their leadership styles to help introduce Generation Z into the workplace. As Trevor has already mentioned, I based my research on the Kurt-Lewin leadership theory, which looks at autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire leadership styles. The chapter goes into further detail surrounding which is the most common leadership style within Company A. Now moving on to one of my key findings from my piece of research from our chapter. I saw there were significant differences in experiences between the two Generation Z cohorts. Even with a short time span within the workplace, they'd all been exposed to various levels of autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire leadership styles. Interestingly, the mean average scores between each age group differ. The old group, born between 1995 and 1996, scored slightly higher on the 3 questions surrounding an autocratic leader, which is intriguing as this cohort are the youngest millennials, early Generation Z employees. In comparison, younger cohort, born between 1997 and 1998, score marginally higher on the democratic leader statements. This is fascinating, but worth looking into whether it's down to an age perspective or if it's caused by generational characteristics. And finally, I thought I'd summarize my research from my previous experiences within the workplace. I've now been with my company for 3.5 years and have been exposed to multiple managers with various leadership styles. For example, within the first 3 years of my apprenticeship, I had 5 different line managers. For me, I had to constantly adapt and learn because this enabled me to reflect upon my previous experiences in the workplace, but also enhance my interest in my research question. As you can see from my slide, I enrolled in the CMD program back in 2017, and I'm now managing 2 direct reports who are in fact Generation Z apprentices. I do recognise that generational studies are complex, especially orientated around the implications of leadership. However, I thought it's key to start this research now and within my place of work. Now, unfortunately, Ashton cannot be here today, but I'm going to pass over to Ashton in a virtual world of a recording, and she'll be explaining her involvement within the chapter. Thank you all for listening.
Hello, my name is Ashton and I'm delighted to be a co-author and contributor to this chapter. Reiterating what my colleagues have said, thank you so much for joining us for this book launch on this. Over the next few minutes, I'll guide you through my research and significant findings. I'll also briefly delve into why I decided to undertake the topic of ethics of fast fashion around Generation Z. So starting with the latter, within my second year of university, I undertook a 6-month internship within a social media agency. Within my time here, I saw the rise in people turning to social media to discuss the ethics around fast fashion and what companies can actually do to be held responsible. So from my research, I can now connect that as 64% of Generation Z claim that supporting topical issues via social media is more effective at making a difference. Yet, as Trevor stated at the time of choosing my final topic, I had briefly forgotten the relationship of my internship and the knowledge it provided me. It was only upon reflection that I noticed connections as to why my interest led me to pursue the topic of ethics of fast fashion around Generation Z. My research towards ethics of fast fashion around Generation Z allowed me to explore various factors as to why this generation may be more conscious. So from climate change to the background and history of CSR, I learned a lot about the characteristics of this generation after me towards fast fashion ethics. As a hypothesis, I predicted that this generation was determined to make a change towards the industry practices. So one of the first routes I took was to view the clothing industry as a whole. And as of 2019, the UK clothing industry had a market value of £63 million, all while being the top industry for environmental pollution. But I thought to myself, if one of the youngest generations with such a high buying power of around $143 billion wanted to buy from companies with good ethics, either this market value would be lower or the levels of environmental pollution may be on the decline, but this just simply wasn't the case. And I think that's what I found as one of my most significant findings. So reflecting on my research as a whole, I think the one significant finding stood out above the rest. This was that my literary review was pointing me in one direction, that Generation Z really cared about CSR practices and ethics towards fast fashion. But my own primary research showed otherwise. So out of a total of 50 respondents, 60% said they do not specifically shop at the fashion brand that they named in previous questions asked, just purely because of their CSR practices. So this finding was what shocked me the most, but as throughout my research, I expected to find correlating responses to those of previous work. For example, the work of Porter Novelli, which found 72% of Generation Z take a company's purpose into consideration when deciding what to buy. I know that this research may be just a start towards understanding Generation Z's viewpoint towards ethics in fast fashion, but I believe more can be discovered in the years to come.
Brilliant. Is your screen flashing all over the place, Frasier? No. Oh gosh, I've got a bit of an issue here with my screen that keeps going in and out. I'm not quite sure what's going on.
Do you want me to stop sharing and share again?
Yeah, let's just see if that makes a difference. Oh, that made a major difference.
Okay, coming up again.
There? There we go. Perfect. Gosh, don't know what that was about. Sorry about that. It's probably come out on the recording as well, but the sound was not affected. So as you were hearing there from Ashton, her passion, he has an industry that is spending millions, and yet here is a younger generation who are labeled as more environmentally conscious, and yet she was very interested, are the two connecting? Because for her, they weren't. And this was for her entire piece of research. Now, Frasier, in a 3-year process, had 5 different managers. Look at it from my perspective. I've got 2 options. I can either ignore their actual worlds and just make sure that they get good marks for their academic work, or I can take their worlds more seriously. Here I can hear the passion from Ashton. What can I do with that? How can I use that concern, that ethical awareness, and shape her as a professional so that once she completes her university degree, I've had some kind of input in shaping somebody who takes those ethics with her into whatever field that she works in. How can I help Frasier deal with this inconsistent leadership? 5 different managers in 3 years. How's that impacted him? I don't want him to take any baggage as a young professional. I don't want him to have any baggage. Can I just ignore that? Or do I purely just focus on his academic work? This is what I'm reflecting on. How do I walk the balance? How do I walk the line where I'm ensuring that they are meeting all the academic standards? Because at the end of the day, they want to pass the degree and they want to pass it with good marks. But how do I prepare them as individuals, as professionals, for the world of work? And this is what work integrated learning is all about. When I meander in the world of academia, I often come across people who are subject discipline specific. They know everything about their disciplines and they are completely focused just on their disciplines. And what they want to get across is the knowledge of that discipline. It's what we call mode 1 knowledge, disciplinary knowledge. Work integrated learning is about mode 2 knowledge. It's about how we can connect that theory to the real world and begin to work with the person who is engaging with all of this in terms of what it means for them. You may be in the wrong career. you may be in the wrong element of that career. And how do you work through those crises and how do you work through those situations? So in many ways, for work integrated learning, we are boundary crossing. We are going from one discipline to the next, because what we're focusing on is not necessarily the disciplinary knowledge, but what we're focusing on is the person who's wanting to master this disciplinary knowledge and take that mastery into the workplace with them. I call it a pracademic, and I came across this term in one of the journal articles that I was looking at. The balance between being an academic supervisor and also making sure that I'm looking after the elements of work integrated learning. Now, what has this got to do again with Frasier and Ashton? Well, again, you can understand the complexity. Ashton had a placement prior to her project. Plus, when I was supervising her, I was supervising 60 other students. So the time that I spent with Ashton was 10, 15 minutes. and this was every now and again, every other week. Other than that, I had group supervisions with the other students. So the opportunities, the time I had available to actually do any kind of job ready plus kind of work with her as an individual was actually very limited, which meant what dominated was the academic agenda, making sure that she referenced properly, wrote properly, all these different kinds of things. With Frasier, I had about 4 or 5 students that I was looking after, and I had about an hour with them. It was about once every 2 weeks, I think it was, which meant I had more time that I could address not just the academic side, but also how Frasier was experiencing the world of work. What was he learning as a result of that? What were the good bits? What were the bad bits? And how this research was informing him as a young professional, and how that would affect his trajectory going forward from here. And so the chapter really captures our journeys. It captures how Ashton initially found this ethical dilemma and how she approached it and how she researched it. The chapter summarizes Frasier's his own exploration into the area of leadership. And don't forget, they could have done any subject under the sun. They weren't given a title. They could have picked any title. These areas that they chose to research were the areas that were influencing them as individuals, which is why they chose to research that. How was I, as the supervisor, how was I going to facilitate the learning from what they were bringing to me, not what I was forcing on them? And how would I balance that between the academia and the work integrated learning processes? So thank you very much for joining us in our session. Frasier, I don't know if there's another slide. Is there another slide? There we go. Sorry, just before I leave you, here's a really good visual to compare the experiences between Frasier, who was on a degree apprenticeship, 3 years intensive in a work context all the way through those 3 years, compared to Ashton, who had a I think it was a 3 months internship, and then finished her 3rd year, where she was involved in part-time work, as most students are, but it was not connected as it would be in an apprenticeship. And you can see the differences there. We know they're different, but what I'm trying to engage with is, what does this mean for me as a work integrated learning supervisor, and how would I be negotiating these complexities and these kinds of differences? So again, thank you for joining us for our chapter, and I hope that we've teased you enough to want to either purchase the chapter or purchase the book. That's it, Frasier. We're done.
We're done.